thank you for the questions that have been coming through. I think there are a few that we'd received also before the session. So I'll just start with one focus on financial services. There was a question on if there was an intention for the UK to look at, or for this report to propose solutions for maybe an industrial strategy around financial services and crypto. I think we have on this call, obviously, the chair of the APPG blockchain and one of the preeminent lawyers in the space. And so it's a question, I think, generally, do we think that there is an opportunity to push forward with perhaps a more concrete industrial strategy around blockchain innovation in the UK?
I think there's an obvious short answer to the question, that this is something where the innovation is developing in all directions. I think from your and my perspective, we see a lot of it in financial services. One of the great trends of the last 6 months or so around digital assets and crypto has been through NFTs. And we've seen there that has led to both brand and consumer engagement right across sports teams, fast-moving consumer goods brands, media and entertainment brands. So it's a topical subject, NFTs, and I think it gets a lot of attention because of the numbers in it, some poor practice in it, and the need for care and guardrails. But for me, the broader message is that demonstrates that there are products evolving that are the gateway into blockchain and digital assets for every industry that we see. So an industrial policy is for sure relevant because the products and the technology and the innovation is making its way right across the industries. It's absolutely not confined to financial services.
Thank you very much, Charles. Martin, I think there was a question for you. One of the participants was asking on your comment regarding the democratic nature of how blockchain can help evolve a whole host of different decision-making mechanisms. And the question was specifically around conflict or dispute resolutions, if there would be a way to have a transparent evolution using blockchain out of democratic principles. It's quite an open question.
Sorry, who's coming? Sorry, Charles. Just quickly, I think, quite a traditionalist when it comes to regulation. Parliament, democratic bodies don't happen in a vacuum, and there is a requirement, at least, and I know it's not shared by everyone, but at least from my perspective and my party's perspective, that these types of technologies require an element of what we would call a traditional regulatory framework. I would hope that we can do that in the international sphere, where we have international regulation, we have agreed standards for products utilizing blockchain. So I think, maybe that answers it. I also noted that there's a question about ministers for digitization or digital ministers. I noticed that here in Westminster, the UK government has a minister, the Secretary of State for Digital, Sport and Media, who has an undersecretary. I'm more a fan of where for example, the Chancellor would take on the role of digitization. That's where we see it in Estonia, because, in many ways, the money controls, the Chancellor controls the purse strings. And I'm glad to see also in Scotland, we've seen recently the Cabinet Secretary for Finance also take on the role of digitization, digital agenda, and maybe hopefully the Chancellor of the Exchequer in Westminster will see that as an opportunity and add it to their portfolio. I think that would show leadership at the top of government in terms of the digital agenda.
Martin, I'd seen another question around how do we limit the bad actors in this space, and how do we kind of, as a sector, perhaps self-regulate? I think first and foremost, we're very fortunate to have the FCA looking after very much consumer protection. There is the FCA MLR registration for money laundering, registration of crypto asset firms. And there's also a list where the FCA has put out firms that are not necessarily following the best practice in terms of looking after consumers. And that's also in the public domain. I mean, it might make sense if we share those links as well in the panel in due course. Charles, perhaps if you have anything, please.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say, because I know there's a question about some of the comments around the FT and also the FCA. Again, I come back from my perspective as a parliamentarian that I think there's a requirement for legislation and regulation. And I think the FCA, rather than supporting self-regulation, we in Parliament should be enabling the FCA to implement legislation from Parliament. I'll be an outsider on this and say that I really do believe that it's time for regulation of products being sold or utilising blockchain technology. So I think I'll maybe be the outsider on that one.
Here. Thank you. Charles, would you have anything to add to that, perhaps?
Yeah, just a couple of points. I'll defer to Martin as the policymaker on the scope of regulation. I'd also agree for sure with his point that this is an international technology, and so domestic regulation that doesn't take account of what's going on in other jurisdictions is not helpful to all the folks that are trying to develop and innovate in the area. So far as self-regulation is concerned, I think it isn't always possible to rely on it, but the industry does have a significant interest in ensuring that the bad actors are discovered and dealt with. There really isn't anything in it for the crypto industry, digital assets industry in the wider sense, if it is seen to be supporting, facilitating financial crime and being painted more generally with that brush. So I think most of the digital assets, blockchain, crypto projects that I'm aware of are very keen to ensure that there are only good actors in the space, because their own projects won't flourish if they're tainted with the issues connected with bad actors. The final point is there's a huge amount of technology and innovation focused on exactly these points. So within the industry, there are many analytics firms, diligence firms, and similar, whose role is specifically to identify scams or potential scams, projects that have got flaws in them, whether they're inadvertent or deliberate. So one of the things that's developed, again, over the last sort of 12 months is that there's been a professionalization of the industry, and the various support services, professional services that sit around the financial markets traditionally have developed out to apply to these new digital assets markets. So just as regulation often trails technology innovation, so do the product and service providers that support it, but they're there now. And digital assets and crypto assets firms are heavy users of these analytics, diligence, and other providers. And there's lots of competition, lots of innovation in order to support the industry being adopted and developed safely.
Thank you. Also, I've noticed some questions are moving back to also to this, the whole argument how UK is becoming an innovation and investment epicentre of everything blockchain, because some questions are really on the economy as a whole, the sectors as a whole, how it's developing. And of course, we have found that we have mainly, of course, this 1.6 billion pounds has gone into small and medium-sized companies, because that are true blockchain sector companies. But of course, we are in a situation where we have both new companies, many of them very young, and we have smaller companies, medium-sized, growing quite fast, and we have the big, gigantic companies. And then, of course, we have the old markets and the emerging markets in many sectors. So I just wonder, Sean, like, if you would actually answer that question on how does the industry transformation look like, and what are there any frictions between most companies are being small, but there are some heavyweights there. How does the market develop, and what are the opportunities and challenges?
I think it's an interesting time. A lot of big companies, and here I speak on behalf of financial services, and Alex, I'm going to pass a question on to you after, so I'll just kind of focus down on financial services. But a lot of the banks are exploring the use of DLT and blockchain for particularly custody and settlement, and some of the, as Martin was mentioning, the collaboration approaches to share information amongst each other. But the smaller firms are doing much more innovative things. We've seen DeFi emerge, decentralized finance, which now has over 200 billion of value staked in, and that has been a factor of kind of 20 growth in the last year. These are all small companies playing in that space. The banks cannot yet engage for a whole host of reasons, not least of all KYC, AML considerations. But I think in that bridge between what these innovative smaller companies are doing, what the big banks are doing, eventually will come, and we've started to see this in our report, some good medium-sized companies that maybe be acquired by the big banks or big firms, and help bring that innovative DNA up into a more mainstream focus. But the question, Alex, I wanted to just pass to you is, we've been speaking a lot about financial services, and perhaps that's my fault, but there were some questions around the broader use cases around innovation, entrepreneurship, and I realized the sound perhaps wasn't as loud in your video. So if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining the higher level view of the report and how we looked at different sectors as well, please.
Okay, thank you for the question. I can even share my screen for a sec to show the mind map again. So basically, yes, fintech and crypto-related companies are making kind of the majority of the sector. But we find out that there are quite a lot of small sections like legal technologies, consulting, insurance, climate changes as well. Companies which are operating in those sectors. So basically, British blockchain community developing in quite a lot of sectors. And I assume in a few years, we'll see quite a lot of companies here on this segment, on this section as well, not only in fintech and crypto segments. So basically, let's help them to grow. That's it.
Yeah, and I can actually add to that thing, because one of the, we have many opportunities, but I think that some of the challenges for the growth is not. I have to say, at the moment, it's probably not the funding that's the biggest challenge. The challenge is really to develop blockchains that's scalable, that can take lots of nodes on, that can be integrated with each other. It's a scalability and interoperability is the big issue. And of course, also the big issue is data management, and in terms of data regulation. So I think that we have there are a lot of other challenges. I know that when we're looking at growth hubs, we do the traditional things. So what are the ingredients for the growth hub? We have to map what they are, the company's investment, the science base, the talent, the technology, all the different ingredients. But blockchain, here regulation is important, and scalability is important, and industry collaboration is important. And these are some of the aspects which we have discussed in the report. And that has been both provided opportunities, but also sometimes been holding back some of the growth in some of the sectors. But other promising sectors, and finance, of course, is we find is energy. Now we have COP26, but even in the report, we find energy, blockchain adoption is very much, even into the arts market. Christian auction houses using it on luxury arts to identify originality of major art pieces. And of course, also in health, COVID-19, but also other areas of health, how we found several hospitals that are using blockchain to control some of their machines or data or temperature. Or I'm not, that really it is being adopted, although most in finance and crypto. I am aware of the time to be. Do we have other? Well, we have definitely other questions in it. Are there other questions you want to pick up right now on, Sean?
I think there's quite a few questions. What we might do is just follow up offline. I'm mindful of time, but thank you very much, Birgitte.
But yeah, okay. So I think that so what I think is very important here, I have my last question also to Martin here, and this is really about. It is an issue that the area of one of the areas of lowest investment is in public services, and this is an issue, because we all know that blockchain for government is very, very important. And I know you're a big advocate for it in Parliament and outside Parliament. How can we, you know, what is the solution? How can public services become a big kind of a user and a procurer of blockchain? And what's holding it back?
Well, thank you, Birgit. I think there's a couple of things. That, first of all, a lack of awareness and knowledge about what the technology can actually do in the public service delivery realm. And at least from a Scottish perspective, there is a kind of foundation document in Scotland in one of the last parliaments called the Christie Report on Public Service Reform. And I think if anyone's interested in how you make the case for improvements in service delivery, I'm certainly not talking about reducing the impact of public service, but improving it. The Christie Report is, I think, a seminal report across the islands about how beneficial public service is. I think it would be very unnatural for me not to say that, given my own political perspective. I think in terms of the tech, there's a real requirement to work with the local authority bodies across the UK, whether it be conventional Scottish local authorities in Scotland, or to be the Local Authority Association, England and Wales, and also their counterparts in Northern Ireland. But I think it also needs the industry to recognise what public service delivery is about. It's not necessarily about a product. The word service is critical in making the case for the technology in that sphere. And again, I will come back to that issue of regulation and creating an equity in the ability both to access, to innovate, and to utilize the technology. It's not just, for example, whether it be small or medium-sized entrepreneurs or big businesses. It is also about public service and maintaining the very fabric of, for me at least, our democratic principles, which are being challenged incrementally, and continuously in present days.
Thank you very much. And before I'm kind of rounding up, does Charles, do you have a last word you want to say?
Well, I think a quick one, and we're talking about the COP conference, and sustainability is an issue in this topic. We can't ignore that. The Global Digital Finance Group published a report earlier this week about sustainability in blockchain. So there's a policy and an engineering problem there that we're well aware of. But I think the interesting thing for me is the analogy around the COP conference and the potential for paradigm shifts. So we're seeing here that innovation around the energy industry isn't now about how do we do the same things slightly better. It's how do we stop that and do things differently. And I think that the digital assets and blockchain uses in an industrial context have the potential for the same thing. This is showing signs of being a paradigm shift, and we should take it as seriously as that.
Great. And Sean, do you have a last word you want to say before I'm...
Yeah, sure. I mean, this has been fascinating to see the 3 years on developments. I'm very curious to see where we are in another 3 years. I think there are some things that I hadn't seen coming, NFTs for one, let alone the rapid rise of DeFi. And I'm looking forward to seeing kind of good institutional collaboration to bring things forward in a responsible way. Thank you.
Alex, do you have anything you want to say before?
Yeah, I wanna mention that in a few months we're going to start a new report, and that would be more ample, I think. And maybe it's better to make even a questionnaire so we can ask companies where to go, where they want to go, and other questions. Good luck. Thank you very much.
And I will just say that basically the videos have now been made public, and the links you have been shared should be working now. And I also want to say here at the end that we really want to use this here opportunity to engage everybody. So this is not the end of our analysis, this is the start. And this is exactly why Alex shared the mind map and shared the interactive analytics, because we think it's very important while we're building while we're making and growing the UK's epicentre for everything blockchain, that actually we do it together to ensure that we're not losing the ecosystem. And you will see on the mind map that we have everybody involved, the investors, the funders, the companies, the academics, the science base, the influencers, the policymakers, the experts, they're all there. So if you want to be part of this, you have to go and have a look at it. And if you think that you have something you want to contribute, or a company that's sufficiently blockchain-centric, we take only blockchain-centric companies, otherwise we could take everybody on board. So it has to be about the blockchain hub. So go and check this, and we will upload the videos to the press launch link, which I sent in the chat a couple of times. And we will look forward to continuing the conversation. And we're also setting up a social media site, a pavilion for the blockchain mapping, where we can actually do much more peer-to-peer conversation in real time around the blockchain industry. And we will be emailing everyone who attended this meeting here or this blog launch around about this, and you can all join us. So I think that I can now conclude today, and do go and check the link in literally in 10 minutes. I will ensure that we have the videos are all uploaded on the press launch website. So I think we can say thank you to our speakers, thank you to Martin, thank you to Charles, thank you to Lord Holmes, who wasn't here, but I'm sure he'll be reviewing it back. And of course, thank you to the amazing team. It's not just me, Sean, and Alex who is behind this report. We have a whole cast of production team in the dozens. So yeah, so this is really it. So thank you, and goodbye for now.